Hello, my name is Bruno, and I have had the privilege of leading this event. Thank you all for joining us online. I know one benefit of a worldwide pandemic is getting to watch TED Talks in your pajamas. 2020 really has been a different year from every other year, hasn't it? The pandemic forces us to stay at home. In Colorado, wildfires force us to stay inside too. So it makes sense that we have grown tired. But as we all probably know by now, nothing ever grows and nothing ever is good when we stand still. So in the beginning of this year, we decided on the theme of this event, coming alive. More importantly, how we can fully impact the world by engaging ourselves and the world around us. Tonight, our 9 speakers will speak under this umbrella theme, offering stories of journey, rebirth, and growth. A counseling psychologist will vividly describe the psychology of the great outdoors. A full-time influencer will talk about how we impact others. A top competitor, an American Ninja Warrior Jr., will share how we can use our obstacles to grow. A schedule of tonight's event is listed in the description box below. If you would like more details, the link to our website is also listed. This session is growth, featuring Sena Uctuk, Sandhya and Chris Bruno. Please welcome our first speaker, Sena, to the stage.
Yeah, I think so. Are you unsatisfied? That's good. As humans, we have a constant drive to be satisfied, whether it be us wanting to change, improve, or add to our complex lives. It can be a drive to learn a new language, or wanting to get a new pet. Something as small as deciding what you would like for dinner, or as big as fighting for equal rights. It can be anything you feel you would like to pursue in order to make your life better. I'm here to share with you today why I think it is important to pursue satisfaction, as well as steps you can take to do so. A little bit about my story. At the start of middle school, I had a drive. It was a drive to make a difference, to change the world. I was being asked questions when I was 11 that were hard for an 11-year-old to answer, more or less think of. Sena, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's like asking me now at 17 what my plans for retirement are. I didn't have an answer. I was starting to be more aware of what was going on around my community, and I saw a lot of negative things, specifically bullying and suicide. I was unsatisfied. I wanted to make a change. My mom stumbled upon a Facebook page for a group called the Payten Project, which was developed to raise awareness and prevent suicide and bullying, as well as working to end the stigma surrounding mental health. I connected with the project immediately, and within a year I became an ambassador. I still am today. My work with the Payten Project has developed my interest in mental health, as well as my passion for public speaking. I learned to understand that because I was unsatisfied, I was able to make a difference. If I hadn't been unsatisfied, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because I was unsatisfied, I was able to make a difference. So, why is it important? Why should we put in the effort to pursuing satisfaction? Well, it's pretty simple. We only need 2 things. 1, we need to be unsatisfied. Go figure. In order to begin the journey, we need a reason to start walking. And 2, we need a general idea. This can be a simple list of goals or something more complex like a vision board. This is to give us a clear picture of what we would like the outcome to be. Without some general sense, it would be like having a drive to remodel your room, but not know what color to paint your bedroom. So let's talk about habit and how it can influence our process in pursuing satisfaction. You are what you eat is a phrase we often hear, but it does not necessarily describe our diets. In context with pursuing satisfaction, it's what we consume. Social media, peer influence, culturally dictated norms, knowledge we absorb via education, what your parents may have told you in a rant about politics, to name a few. What we consume daily affects our thought process and influences how we perceive the world. This directly influences what makes us unsatisfied. So, how do we tailor habit to guide us towards success? What tools can we use to do so? First, we need to self-reflect. Self-reflection is key in understanding how we think and provides a foundation for the journey ahead. You should be asking yourself questions like, why am I unsatisfied? Have there been specific events that have influenced this feeling? How far am I willing to go to pursue satisfaction? What things could I do to succeed? Self-reflection, again, is key in learning on how we think and also understanding what we can do to pursue satisfaction. Next, we need research. Research gives us a general picture of how we can pursue satisfaction. So, for example, if you wanted to grow a tree, you would research the best tree for the climate, find, resources it will need to thrive, as well as steps to care for it. Or if you tend to procrastinate, maybe you can find TED Talks or podcasts about why we procrastinate, as well as give yourself the tools to change this habit. Resources are beneficial in forwarding our movements and driving us. We can use teachers, professors, friends, colleagues, YouTube videos, podcasts, libraries, TED Talks to help us and give us the knowledge we need to forward our movements. And so for the next point, we need to surround ourselves with our goals. This can be simply following hashtags or accounts you agree with, or getting books on the subject, maybe talking to people you know about the knowledge and opinions they have. You need to become what you consume. A study done by the University of Southern California and University College London explored how habit guides behavior. In the second study they did, they researched the tendency for people to speak loudly in sports stadiums. They found in the study, participants who habitually visited their sports stadiums spoke more loudly when primed with pictures of the context, regardless of whether or not they had a goal to visit the stadium afterwards. Next, we need a map. Not a plan, a map. A plan is a set of steps, a list of instructions that you have to complete something. A map, on the other hand, it provides the foundations for opportunity. It lays out what options are available for you and gives you the freedom to explore. It does not necessarily tell you step by step how to do something, but you instead get to go at your own comfort level. Self-reflection is key at this point as well, in order to determine your comfort level and understand what you plan to do next. Next, we need to self-reflect again. So self-reflection is, again, beneficial in laying out our foundation. You need to understand what your comfort levels are. You need to understand, where you plan to go with this. Understand why you're unsatisfied again, revisit. After this, we need to use our personality. Self-reflection is beneficial in understanding how we can use our personality to drive us towards success. For example, if you're someone who is more introverted, so you tend to work on your own, like to go at your own pace without the influences of others burdening you, consider using technological resources to your advantage and abiding in spaces you most feel comfortable. It would also be a good idea to confide in a close circle of friends and share your interests when you feel like it. On the other hand, if you're more extroverted, so you tend to seek out opportunities to be social, and you gain energy from talking with others, it would be a good idea to share with as many people as you would like. This will encourage you to be reliable because people know your interests and would like to see you pursue them. Understanding our personalities is key in order to drive us towards success. We can equip our personalities with the tools necessary to pursue satisfaction, as well as protect us from failure. And on that final note, we need to be not afraid of failure. Einstein once said, anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new. So instead of being afraid of making mistakes, use it as an opportunity to try something new and to grow. You never know where you might get. So now that I have shared my story and my thoughts a bit, I hope I have encouraged you to pursue satisfaction and make a difference on the world. The world needs it. Best of luck in your journey. Thank you so much.
Our names hold great meaning. Our next speaker will share how she discovered her own name and how you can rediscover your own. Please welcome Sandhya to the stage.
Our names hold power and stories. They define us. How we recognize one another and our identity is encompassed in our names. There is power in naming people and things. It is a marking and a calling into being. We see evidence of this as we see parents pouring themselves over lists of names as they come to naming their baby. Throughout our lives, we will have many different names. Some of those might be nicknames that hold belonging and affection, and some of those names may hold pain and scars. The names that hold pain and scars can affect our identity and how we view ourselves. For example, if someone comes up to you and calls you a loser, and there's no one there to tell you that you indeed are not a loser, you will start to believe that you are a loser, and this will significantly affect your self-esteem. We need to find healing from the names that have caused us harm so that we can come alive to our true names and the confidence and identity that come with that. My name story is a radical story of transformation and discovery. My story begins in New Delhi, India, as a baby girl. The first names that were associated with me were desolate and orphan. When I was a few months old, I was dropped off by an unknown person, and I lived in that orphanage for the first year of my life. When I was 1, I was adopted by a family here in the United States, and they gave me the name Jennifer, an American name. At school, people shortened my name from Jennifer to Jenny. But the irony of my parents giving me this name is that they never actually called me by this. They called me the Thing and an It, and other cruel names. These names shaped how I felt about myself, and they hindered my confidence. It made me question if I was worthy of love and my existence. The good news is that my story doesn't stop there. A handful of years ago, a friend asked if they could see a picture of me as a baby girl. And I said, yes, I have proof that I am the cutest Indian baby you will ever see. So as I was looking through a book with a few photos, I came across this picture. This is me. The thing that stuck out to me about this picture is that it had my American name on it, but the date was still when I was in the orphanage. I wondered how that could be. So I took the picture out to look at it a little closer, and I happened to flip it over. And on the back, it said, "They call her Sandhya in the nursing home hospital." That's my name. I didn't know how to say it, so I ran to a computer and I put it into Google Translate. And I kept hearing it over and over, Sandhya, Sandhya. A little while later, I got curious. What does Sandhya mean? So I looked it up, and it actually means to connect darkness to light and a lower power to a higher power. I was in awe. I started to invite friends to call me Sandhya, and over time, I experienced healing. And as I experienced healing, I realized that I came to a point of acceptance that my family who had adopted me, who had disowned me when I turned 18, I didn't want to share that last name anymore. I wanted to move on and move forward. This healing propelled me to consider changing my whole name legally. But I wondered, how do I find a new last name? I was about to head out to Colorado for a conference, and I wondered, do you think I might get a new last name there? Do you think there might be some sign waiting for me? Sure enough, there was. As I was walking in Old Town down Main Street, I happened to look up, and I saw Oak Street. And it grabbed my attention and moved in my heart. I am a lover of nature and a lover of trees. And as I researched the meaning behind oak trees, they actually symbolize resilience, resistance, growth, and strength. It was meant to be. That is a perfect picture of my story. So the next day, a friend of mine came up to me and said, "Hey, Sandhya, I was hiking in the mountains yesterday, and I came across a sign that had your old last name on it. And I just wanted to tell you, I was thinking about you, and I wondered, are you ever going to change your name? Because if you do, I want to help you pay for it." What? I didn't understand. The thing about this is that I hadn't told anyone that I was considering changing my name legally. And I knew that I was moving in the right direction. So, a few months later, I found myself in a courtroom with 50 of my friends and a gavel in my hand and declaring myself Sandhya Oaks. It was a day of celebration and joy. I actually consider it my name change day. This is my name story, and I'm curious, what does your name mean? Do you know the story behind it? Are there harmful names that you need healing from and to walk away from? Thank you.
We don't just tell stories, we are stories. We are shaped by the stories we live, but sometimes we're stuck in stories not quite our own. Please welcome Bruno to the stage to speak on how we can restory our own lives.
When I was 8 years old, I met my best friend for the first time. His name was Buddy, and from the moment we met, we were the best and fastest of friends. And for hours and hours, we would go out into the mountain forest that surrounded my childhood home, and we would conquer kingdoms and slay dragons and create grand imaginary domains. And I remember once we went up to this big rock outcropping that was in the middle of crazy old Helen's 1,000-acre ranch. And it was rumored that if Helen caught you trespassing on her property, she would shoot you with a sawed-off shotgun from her front porch. But it was worth the risk. And as Buddy and I made our way past her front porch, survived the shotgun, and got up to the top of that rock outcropping, I remember as we stood there together and looked out over miles and miles of earth and sky, we commanded the wind and the rain and the sky and the clouds, and it was epic. And something in my little boy heart gave itself over to Buddy, and I knew from that moment on that I had found a friend for life. Well, now, 35 years later, as a licensed professional counselor, I listen to people tell these kinds of stories from their life all the time, these important moments from their past that still have impact and importance to their life today. You see, the logo of Restoration is the cross-section. The logo of Restoration is the cross-section of a tree. And inside the tree are all the rings of the tree that tell the stories and the seasons of the moments of that tree's life. And encoded into the stories are the experiences of that tree. Now, on the outside of the tree is the adult tree, but on the inside are all the seasons and all the ages that tree has ever been. The most important parts in learning how to read the rings of a tree are to learn how that tree has experienced trauma. And in a tree's life, there's two main kind of categories of trauma that the tree will experience in the wild. The first is what we have right now throughout many states in our country, especially here in Colorado, and that is the trauma of fire. And fire will come and it will blaze through the forest and it will burn the tree, and that trauma will get locked into the rings of that tree, some external harm that has come and harmed that tree. Well, the other category of trauma in the wild for a tree is not something external, but something that I would call drought. And this is where something that is good has been withheld from the tree. Something the tree needs in order to live has been withheld. That also is a trauma, and it gets written into the rings of a tree. Crazy thing is that it's the same with people. That our stories get written into and encoded into our lives. And the most important ones, the most shaping ones, are usually marked by some level of trauma, harm, pain. It's really quite interesting, actually. You know, when we experience trauma, especially in those younger years of our lives, that the trauma gets stored into our neurology. Our neurobiology actually responds and is formed in response to the experiences that we have, the traumatic experiences that we have as children. And so as with those rings of the tree, we also have moments of fire and we have moments of drought that get locked into our very inner core. And the impact of those stories continues to live with us throughout the rest of our lives. As those stories continue to show up in places in our lives, we live as if those are the ruling narratives. Those are the truest parts about us. And we get into what I would call a story rut, a place where the story digs deep and continues to perpetuate itself. So now, as I work with clients and they come to me with their stories, and they're dealing with issues in the time today, dealing with depression, anxiety, addictions, relationship struggles, whatever it might be, usually what's happening today has something to do with a story rut that was formed years ago through a traumatic experience as a child. A traumatic experience like fire or a traumatic experience like drought. And that story rut forms in them and they continue to live out of that space. And now today they're struggling with some level of discomfort or challenge in their lives. Well, before I get too far ahead of myself, I have a confession to make. And this confession has to do with Buddy. You see, there's something about Buddy that you don't know, and I'm a little ashamed to tell you. And that is that Buddy, my best friend, was a horse. Yes, he was a horse. And before you start getting all judgy on me for having a horse as a best friend, you need to know a little bit more of the context of my life. You see, I was born into a family with one older sister, and when she was born with a mental and physical disability that even to this day prevents her from getting anywhere beyond a 1 or 2-year-old level of functioning. And my parents were devoted to her care. They were devoted to her care and wanted for her to succeed, but by the time I came into that family system, there wasn't as much care left over for me. The attention and care that I needed as a boy wasn't there as much as what I actually needed until Buddy came along. And so when Buddy came along, I attached to him and I finally found a friend and someone to play with and adventure with and be with, and someone who would give me their undivided attention and affection. And so, of course, for years, Buddy was my trusty steed. And we would go and, like I said, conquer kingdoms innumerable until Buddy died. And you can imagine, for where I was as a boy, that was a significant story. For what I had experienced previously as drought had suddenly turned into fire. Now, he'd been sick for several days, and we didn't quite know what was going on for him. And so my dad finally invited the vet to come over and then sent me inside the house. And I remember running upstairs to the master bathroom, and above the bathtub was this high window. And I remember climbing into the bathtub and then climbing on top of the edge of the bathtub just to get high enough to see out the window to where Buddy was in the corral below. And as I watched the vet check him out and look at him, I could see that something was really, really painful inside of Buddy. And then I saw the moment that something ruptured inside him, and my best friend collapsed to the ground. I saw the vet walk over to him, inspect him a little bit more, and then slowly start to shake his head. And I remember when the vet looked up, made eye contact with my dad, and pronounced my best friend dead. As I stood there on the edge of that bathtub and looked out that window, it wasn't just something in Buddy that died. something inside of me collapsed as well, because my best friend, the one that I had connected to, the one I had found favor with and affection with and attention with and adventure with, that part of me died with him as well. And I remember standing there feeling the pain of that loss, looking out that window, and I made a vow. I made a vow to never again give myself like that to another. I made a vow to never again become that close, because to come that close meant that death was lurking right around the corner. And I knew even then as a little boy that I could not sustain that kind of loss again. And so I shut my heart off. I raised the walls. I kept my distance. And in that moment, a story rut was formed. And the reality is that I lived like that for decades. And all the relationships that I had were walled off and kind and friendly and all that, but they were walled off and at a distance, and I never fully gave myself over to another like that. You see, the reality is that Buddy's death is not the worst thing that has ever happened to me in this life, not by far. But every loss that that little boy experienced since then has been through the lens of that experience. And every loss that I experienced as a little boy just deepened that rut and raised those walls even higher, convincing me that it was true that I was destined to live at a distance and behind a wall. Until a few years ago, my wife gave me a picture. And this was a picture of a horse. This picture was given to me as a birthday present, and it was an invitation from her. And on the surface, you might say, "Oh, isn't that nice? She gave you a picture of a horse." And I would say, yes, it is really nice, but it's so much more than that. You see, not only did she know of Buddy's existence in my life, not only did she know about Buddy's passing and what that was for me, she also knew what it meant and what happened to me in the moment that Buddy died, and she knew that part of me died as well. And she'd also been bumping up against those walls in my life for years. And that gift of the picture of a horse was a kind invitation to re-story my life, to come to a new place of imagining what might be possible. You see, restoring is coming alongside of someone through something that I call disruptive kindness. It is the kindness that recognizes that something, yes, has died and honors that which has died, and also still hopes for something to come alive again. It helps someone reimagine the spaces that have been ruts in their lives and allows them to come back into a place of life that they forgot was possible. And so in that moment of receiving that picture from my wife, she was inviting me to restore my life and literally saying, yes, that was hard. Yes, that was wrong. Yes, no boys should grow up living in that kind of emotional drought. And yes, the fire that you experienced in that moment is far too much for a little boy to bear. And yes, the raising of those walls and the distancing of your heart, that makes a lot of sense. And it might actually have been the best thing for you to do in that moment. And what might it be like for you to come alive again? What might it be like for you to reimagine? What might it be like for you to say, hey, maybe there's something else that you could live with, some other story that might actually be worth living? So now, as I work with clients, and they bring their depression and their anxiety and their addiction and their relationship struggles, we start there, we focus there, but very quickly we move from the present into the past. And more often than not, we find story ruts that have kept them stuck in a story that they never wanted to live. They never hoped to live, and they were not designed to live in. And those story ruts keep them stuck, and that's what's driving the addictions and the depression and the anxiety. And so to restore your life is not to find ways to manage your symptoms or change your behavior. To truly come alive is to step back into those places with that disruptive kindness and honor that which has died and reimagine what it might be to come alive again. And to give a different narrative, to reimagine a different narrative with and for that person, and that is what I am passionate about doing. So you'll be happy to know I now have human friends, and not just animals. And it is in relationship with those human friends and together with my wife that I've learned to lower those walls just a little bit more each year. And that the distance between me and others has shrunk a little bit more each year as I've learned to reimagine what it might look like for me to restory my life and live in relationship like I was designed to live. And so I'm wondering what it might look like for you to restory your life. What might it look like for you to live free and to come alive again? What little boy inside of you is peering out that bathroom window, erecting walls and creating distance? What little girl inside of you is living a story that she never wanted to have? Well, the next step for me is to take my human friends and to go back to crazy old Helen's ranch, sneak past her front porch, survive the sawed-off shotgun once again, climb up to that rock outcropping, and actually have adventures, conquer kingdoms, slay dragons, and play with the people that I was designed to play with. What is your restory? Thank you.
This concludes our journey session. We will begin again at 4 o'clock. You are free to take a quick bathroom break, grab a snack, and then come back for new stories on rebirth. See you soon. Hello and welcome back to the Rebirth session, featuring Payten Nichols, Chris Thompson, and Ryan Rouillard. So what is the future of agriculture? Please stay tuned for Payten Nichols to tell us just that.
I believe in the future of agriculture. That simple phrase opens as the beginning of a 5-paragraph long creed, detailing the standards and ideals held by members of the FFA, or the Future Farmers of America, which sports the title as the largest youth organization in the nation. Just for reference, this creed was written by a man named Irwin Milton Tiffany back in 1928 and was adopted by the National FFA organization 2 years later at their convention in 1930. Let's pause for a moment and observe a bit of the social climate at the time. In the year 1930 alone, agriculture made up approximately 21.5% of the American labor force and contributed about 7.7% of the nation's GDP. Now, let's compare that to 2019, where those involved in agriculture comprised only 1.3% of the American labor force and contributed about 1% to the nation's GDP. Wait, what's with this drop? What's with this decrease? The answer to our rather curious anomaly can be found in the rapid urbanization of the United States following President FDR's New Deal and the high that the nation was riding after victory in World War II. The ideal standard of living became picket fence neighborhoods and trimmed lawns, thus causing the average American to leave the farm for the city. Now that lands us in our current predicament, one that spells startling realizations such as how the average American is 3 to 4 generations removed from the farm. Or, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the average age of the American farmer is 57 and a half years old. I'll press play on that opening phrase again. I believe in the future of agriculture. With odds that may appear unsurmountable, believing might seem difficult. I mean, it's rather disheartening to see this drop in a profession that was literally the cause of humanity settling down and specializing into many of the careers we see today. However, rest assured that this isn't as terrible as one might think. And that is thanks to a rather special, dynamic, talented breed of individuals who make it their life's goal to instill a love and a passion for this great industry. Those people are called agricultural educators. Wait, hold on. Agriculture can be taught? Sounds crazy, right? The thought of students sitting in a classroom and learning about farming and ranching can strike a rather uncanny image into the minds of those who are unfamiliar with it. However, believe it or not, agricultural education is much more prevalent and more modern than one might think. According to the National Association of Agricultural Educators, or the NAAE, approximately 11,000 schools across the United States, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, offer an agricultural education experience to their students. What these students learn, however, is oftentimes as varied as the climate, the commodity, and the agricultural practices local to their area. See, the process is simple. Every student begins in an introduction class. In these classes, students are taught the history of agriculture in their area, the careers offered by the great industry, and then they get to enjoy little snippets of other classes offered through the school's ag program. For example, students here in northern Colorado might learn more about the production of sugar via sugar beets, or the logistics and science behind beef production than, say, students in Florida, who might be learning more about the industry behind citrus fruits and sugarcane. Again, the climate and the commodity are often terms of variation for the curriculum given to the students. Now, you'd think, with all of this variation in terms of classes offered, that these programs receive mass funding from schools. But oftentimes that isn't the case. Allow me to take a more personal turn with this. See, the agriculture education program I am part of, through Windsor High School, was one of the original 10 schools with an FFA chapter. In fact, we got to sign the state charter back in 1929. Windsor kept that reputation as they received funding from scholarships, fundraisers, and grants, and occasionally from the school. That is until the 1980s, when budget cuts to the program forced the chapter to dissolve. And it remained all but forgotten until the early 2000s, when a small group of students had this initiative to put together a new chapter, and eventually they convinced the school district to bring in teachers to educate these students. Flash forward to nearly 2 decades later. Windsor FFA stands as one of the top 5 largest chapters in the state of Colorado, with numerous alumni going on to serve as state officers, and countless current members taking competitive teams to national conventions as not only state champions, but as representatives of the state of Colorado and of Colorado agriculture. But if the future seems so bright, why change it? If farmers and ranchers make up only 1.3% of the American labor force, why go through all the trouble of creating an agricultural education program just for a small statistic? The why comes in rather startling statements made by those who have not had the opportunity to partake in this experience. For example, 14.6 million Americans believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. I'll let you simmer on that for a moment. That's insane, right? Due to agriculture being one of the world's oldest professions, those involved in the industry have had massive amounts of time to adapt to a population that always has been and always will be growing quickly. We are expected to reach 9 billion people by the year 2050. How do you feed 9 billion hungry mouths? You advance. These advancements see no bounds, ranging from humane slaughter of livestock to vertical farming and to even precision crop management using drone technology. These advancements give all the more reason for students to be learning everything they can about the industry and to be adapting and changing and ebbing and flowing wherever this industry goes. But how? How does something as rudimentary as the baselines of agriculture relate to the grand act of coming alive? Well, agriculture in itself is the business and the art, if you will, of keeping people alive. But I know that answer might be a little too obvious and a little too easy to grasp. So try this on for size. When a student joins their first agricultural education class and gets that firsthand experience as to where their food comes from and how it gets from farm to table, that spark, that desire, that drive to learn more comes alive. Maybe that student attends their first national convention and makes their way through swarms of members donning the famous corduroy jacket in the well-named Sea of Blue. That feeling of being a small yet significant cog in a much larger, much more all-encompassing machine comes alive. Let's say that student goes on, earning the coveted position in every state association as a state officer. That student hears their name and their chapter announced before sprinting on stage to join a dynamic team of individuals. Sure, that livelihood, that drive, that sense of passion might already be very much alive. But getting to travel and meet incredible members and instill those feelings in the hearts and minds of the future, That's what I call coming alive. It's something, as a future agricultural educator, a current FFA member, and as someone who was born and raised in the ag industry, I can attest to. Not only is instilling this love and planting and growing it for the future an amazing opportunity, it's a requirement. See, there's this famous saying coined by speakers, ag advocates, and organizations aplenty. The saying goes a little something like this: without farmers, you would be naked, hungry, and sober. So think a farmer, think a rancher, think an ag teacher, think a food scientist, a geneticist, an ag mechanic, think anyone involved in processing, producing, and marketing the products that you use on a daily basis. Thank them for simply coming alive in the industry, the business, the art of keeping us alive. Thank you.
YouTuber, influencer, TikToker, but does influencing others even require followers? Please welcome Chris Thompson to the stage.
My name is Chris Thompson, and the game Dance Dance Revolution changed my life, which is a phrase I never thought that I would say. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dance Dance Revolution, it is a game where you step on arrows on the ground that correspond with arrows on a screen to music, and it makes me look like I can dance for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. And anyone who has watched me dance understands that's quite the accomplishment. This was 2006. I was at an arcade with my dad and my friend Tessa, and I had just bought a camera that had the ability to shoot video, which is something that wasn't as common back then. And I asked Tessa to take a picture of us dancing, but instead, she takes a video clip that will go on to launch my career. Now, when I saw this video, how brilliant it was, I knew that my MySpace page needed to see this video. But back then, you didn't have the ability to upload video onto MySpace, so I found a private hosting site, put it over there, linked it to my MySpace page, got rave reviews, my top 8 loved it, but then I started getting comments. I started getting emails from this private hosting site. I got my first hater comment almost immediately. And in their defense, I am a bad dancer, but I was more concerned with how they were finding this video if it was private. Turns out this is not a private site, it's a very public social media. It's a 6-month-old website called Uctuk. And I was at the beginning stages of what would go on to become a huge industry. Now back then, there wasn't a name for what it is that I do, but now I am called an influencer, which is a title I reluctantly accept at times because there's a lot of negative stigma surrounding this term. I hear we are vapid and self-centered and disruptive, and there are examples of this, for sure. But as someone who's been there from the beginning, I really want to challenge this idea. And the main reason I want to challenge it is because when you ask elementary school age kids and middle school age kids about what they want to be when they grow up, the number one answer is now influencer. And we have the ability to shape the way that they will use their influence in the future with our current actions. So how do we do that? I think the first step is changing the definition of influencer. Usually when you ask someone, what is an influencer, they'll say something along the lines of someone with a large social media following who creates content on the internet. But what's the threshold? How many followers do you need to be considered an influencer? Is it 5,000? Is it 500,000? Is it 1 million? I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about the person who had the most influence over you in your life. And now I want you to ask yourself this question. How many social media followers did they have at the height of their influence over you? And if you're anything like me, you were thinking the exact same number. 0. You do not need a large, a small, any social media following to be an influencer. My parents are influencers, teachers, friends. And at the height of their influence over me, not one of them had social media. To me, influencer is much more a verb than a title. It is less, I am an influencer, and more, how do I use my influence? The follower count denotes nothing but how far your reach can go, not how you use it. This next section I lovingly call my 10-year overnight success story. A lot of people see top content creators, but they don't know how much work goes into getting to that level. And to give you guys an idea of exactly how early on in the game I was, when I started on YouTube, you needed about 10,000 subscribers to be in the top 100 most subscribed of the entire website. And now that number is 27 million. So the game has expanded quite a bit. My first lesson was in failure. And not regular failure. It's public failure. You could put your heart and soul into a piece of content and it flops right in front of everybody. And it hurts. It still hurts to this day. But I started to look at it as a process of growth instead of a failure on my part, like the end of the road for me. The next lesson I had was in perseverance and patience. Perseverance and patience in the fact that when I first started on YouTube, I didn't even know how to transfer footage from a camera to a computer. And then within 3 or 4 years, I was producing full-length music videos. But there was a lengthy process for that. I remember this video that I was just showing. Essentially, I wanted to edit a video and I didn't know how, and I locked myself in a room for 12 hours until I finished that video, but I got it done. Also perseverance in the fact that there's a lot of changes that happen that are so out of your control. Changes of algorithm, disappearance of platforms. Me personally, I was homeless twice in the pursuit of being a full-time content creator. I was broke way more than I was successful, but I loved what I was doing. You have to have the love to make it. As long as I had a roof over my head and food in my belly, I was good. And that love is what's going to lead you to your why, your purpose for posting. That's what you launch your career off of. And I would discover my why in 2008. A proposition passed in California taking the rights away from LGBTQ+ people to be able to marry. And I knew there was going to be some sort of gathering of people, and I figured I'd just grab my camera and see if I could get some footage. And when I showed up, there was maybe a few dozen people, and they were upset, and there were some speakers. But pretty soon, that few dozen people turned into thousands of people. Those speeches turned into marches down some of the largest streets in Los Angeles. Helicopters above us, riot police surrounding us, filling the square in front of the CNN building, demanding attention for what had just happened. And for the first time, instead of turning the camera to myself and saying how I felt about it, I turned the camera to them. And then when I uploaded their story, I watched how it elevated their voices and educated people and created civil discourse. You guys remember civil discourse? Those were the days. I saw that my purpose was to use this big, beautiful platform that I had to elevate and motivate other people. And that is something that I have done for the rest of my career. And it didn't always lead to the biggest numbers, but it created impact. And I prioritize impact over numbers any day of the week. But none of this matters. And I mean none of this without this final element, and that's authenticity, which is admittedly a word that people throw around maybe a little too much, so let me break down exactly what I mean by authentic. You have to authentically love and believe in what you post, or if you have any success at all, it will be short-lived. Let's compare it to dating. You first start dating someone, you put your best foot forward, you smile a lot more, you probably ignore some things that would normally annoy you because you want to get into a relationship with that person. Then the honeymoon phase kind of fades out. Things start getting a little bit more real, and you start to see a lot of tension in your relationship, or the relationship ends altogether. And the reason is the person who had invested in you now no longer recognizes the person that they invested in. Who is this person? And that is the relationship that you'll have with your audience, so keep it real. Now, someone who I really look up to when it comes to authenticity is Brene Brown. Oh, I love Brene Brown. She's an author, she's a professor, she studies shame and vulnerability, and she was always successful. I discovered her, like a lot of people did, through her TED Talk. And I know exactly why her TED Talk was so successful. It's because she took a risk. She started sharing stories about herself that maybe didn't put her in the best light. But it humanized her. It gave people someone to connect to. And we are all in the business of human connection. We all live in fear of speaking our truth out loud. Even me right now. I'm nervous how you're going to judge what I'm saying. But I have to lean into that fear so that the people who are listening feel less alone in a world where that is so needed. Connection. I'll leave you guys with the proudest achievement of my career. I was in Chicago visiting my family, and I had a viewer of mine who I'd known for a long time who was passing through Chicago, and he said, "Hey, let's meet up." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Let's get pizza." And I said, "Yes." And by the way, if you're ever trying to seduce me into a conversation, pizza is a really good start, especially Lou Malnati's pizza. It's the best pizza, don't at me. He asked me if I remembered a video called "There's Nothing Wrong with You." And I didn't remember this video because I made a video every single day for 6 years. And some of these videos were pretty much just to keep the streak alive, and this was an example of that. One take to my iPhone, no editing, poor lighting, but I still wanted to make sure that I was putting out a good message. There's nothing wrong with you. He told me that was the first video of mine that he had ever seen. I was like, cool. Then he said he was in a hotel room when he saw it. I was like, okay. Then he told me he was in the bathroom when he watched it. I was like, TMI. He had his clothes laid out. He had notes written to his loved ones. And he was in the final moments of a 6-month plan to end his life. And somehow, in that moment, he found my video. And the title alone spoke to him. And in that moment, he decided he wanted to live. His life is my proudest achievement. He is now engaged. He just moved into a beautiful new house. He's got a great job. I get to officiate his wedding next year, which is a humongous honor. But because I took my influence seriously, he lives. And that's the whole point. Everybody who's watching right now, you are all influencers. Does not matter how many followers you have. Your words have power. Use that power for good. Put good messages out into the world. You never know at what moment in somebody's life they're going to need that message. Thank you.
Do we ever stop growing? Should we ever stop growing? Please welcome sports broadcaster turned EMT, Rouillard, to the stage.
There are some great New Year's Eve traditions out there, but mine doesn't center around midnight or fireworks or a group celebration. My favorite is to compose my end-of-year journal entry. I write in my journal throughout the course of the year, but those first 364 days, it's all dedicated to small events, little happenings, basically something for the archives. It all builds up to that last day, though, when I get a chance to encapsulate and summarize a year of life. How did I grow and change? Who did I meet? What new places, what new experiences did I get to take in? All those things come together on December 31st for me every year. And every entry has its own theme and its own impact. They're all special to me, but there's one in particular that stands out, and that came on the final day of 2018. It was a beautiful morning. I was actually home for the holidays, and it was still quiet out in the woods. I went for a walk, found a bench. Fog was still coming through the trees. The only sound out there was this little creek ambling through the evergreens, and it gave me time to think and reflect. And while I was out there amongst the green and the trees and the peacefulness, I came to this epiphany. No matter what it may seem like, we don't stop growing. Not now, not tomorrow, not next year, maybe not even until we leave this earth. And I got there after thinking about all these times earlier in my life where I thought I had. I had found the finished version of me. I was done growing. The person I was today is the person I'll be in 50, 60, 70 years when I go to the grave. I realized the stupidity in that pretty quickly. Time went on, another couple months, maybe a year passed, and then I did find the finished version of me. Yeah, I'm kidding. It took another couple cycles for it to finally hit home that it really wasn't going to happen now or anytime in the future. So that morning, the last day before we turned the calendar over to 2019, I changed my mindset altogether. Instead of looking for the finished version of me or trying to find that end point of growth, I not only accepted but embraced the idea that growth is perpetual and that it offers us all these different avenues and branches and frameworks to look at life through. And that is what makes it exciting. But let me take you even further back to contextualize why I was in the mindset of growth and change, rebirth, transformation, all these things. I was a baseball broadcaster at the time. I spent 7 years calling action in collegiate wood bat leagues and spent some time in the minor leagues as well. Took me all over the country. It was a blast. It was my dream job come true. I was a kid in Seattle, growing up at the age of 5, 6, 7, listening to Mariners games every night with the Hall of Fame voice of Dave Niehaus narrating the action for me, and I wanted to be him. And starting my senior year of high school, pretty much every action I took, directly, indirectly, somewhere in between, was in search of accomplishing that goal. It didn't matter to me that I was missing family events and social time and vacations because I was doing not only what I loved, but for me, what I figured was my calling, my destiny, my thing in life. And that was something I had looked for a long time. See, growing up, the people I admired the most, the ones I saw the most success in, were the ones that had consistency. They had the same job their entire lives. They lived in the same place their whole life. Maybe they still had the same friends that they had in kindergarten. All those things in consistency translated to success for me. And so having baseball as that thing I loved and could be happy with for years and years and years equaled success. And everything was great until it wasn't. In the fall of 2018, I started hearing a little noise coming from right around here. This red pumping thing. Mine's right about here. You can check for yours. I promise you it's there, though. We all have one. Mine had been whispering to me for a long time that I wasn't quite as happy as I thought. And you see, it was hard for me to listen because I got so accustomed to listening to the pink squishy thing up here, you know, the one that has logic and sense and has a lot of security to it. So when this guy was trying to holler at me, feelings and emotions and uncertainty, it was really hard to listen. But I remember one night specifically in the fall of 2018, this guy got so loud, he was out shouting this one, and he was saying, the reason you need change is you want something more out of life. You want to make a difference for others with your work. You want to contribute positively to their lives. And he was right. I wasn't doing that in baseball. I wasn't doing that anywhere else in my life. And it took a lot of guts, a lot of courage to even take a listen to what was being said. And I'll tell you this, just by opening my ears to what was coming out of here made me feel like a failure. I felt like I was failing myself, my family, my friends, coworkers, even the strangers that would tune in to listen to the games I was calling. What were all those people going to think when I gave up my consistency and happiness and success to listen to feelings and emotions and uncertainty and take a risk in life? Naturally, I thought it over for quite a few months. I did have to use a little bit of this guy along the way, but I didn't tune this out. This was a big part of me. And at last, I decided the change was going to be made. I was going to leave baseball and pursue firefighting. Talking about sports, running into burning buildings. Bit of a difference. It was terrifying. It was mortifying to think that I had been on my track. I had found my thing, my calling, my happiness, and all of a sudden, I was going to take this leap of faith and go elsewhere. But I listened to my heart. I made that leap. And then I started listening some more. You see, where I was living at the time when I made this decision was a place that was not good for me. I was there because that's where work was. This guy started to say, take a look somewhere else. I found Fort Collins, Colorado in the fall of 2019. This guy led me here, and it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And you know what? I listened some more. Remember how I told you I wanted to go into firefighting? I did. I started at least. Part of the training for that was to get a certification as an EMT. And while I was going through that process, he started yelling again, out screaming, this guy, saying, this is what you want to do. Contributing to medicine, contributing directly to patients instead of running into buildings and rappelling out of windows is how you can make your biggest impact on others. So I listened again, rediverted myself to becoming an EMT, and recently got my first job doing exactly that. And it felt so good to listen, I kept on doing it some more. Listened to my heart when he was asking me who I really was, what values were truly important to me, and what stuff maybe was a facade I was putting up to either convince myself or family or friends that I was happy in my old way of doing things. But continuing to listen down here, it's more than just bump, 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 by the way. He's got some good stuff to say. it all rejuvenated me and energized me, and it's changed my outlook on the future. Even looking into the next couple years, where I'm currently at as an EMT, the next step for me is to look into becoming a paramedic. And it's something that's really exciting to me, but get this. There's a Walden University study out there that says the average length of a paramedic career fits on one hand. It's 4 years. Now, the old me would be freaking out right now, probably would have never even started this venture, knowing that the length of my next career would be the same as my time in high school. But the new me is kind of excited, because after potentially 4 years, and maybe it'll be 1, maybe it'll be 14, but whenever that time ends, another chapter gets to begin. And that's how I see life in general. It's this big story with a lot of great chapters. I love to read. My favorite books don't have 3 chapters. They have 53, 83, 103, whatever it may be. And each chapter gives you a chance for new opportunities, new directions, new hope, new outlooks on life. And that's what excites me going forward as well. It's not just career-based either. I think to the future, when I get married and have kids, buy my first home, maybe move again, change careers again, experience new foods, new cultures, all these things, those are all chapters I can add to this great story of life that I've been writing. And it's all centered around listening here instead of here. There's room for both. But by not muffling this guy anymore and giving him some airtime, it's drastically changed my outlook on life. And I hope the same can be true for you. No matter where you are, who you are, what you are in life, there's always time to stop and listen and maybe make a change. So whether you're in middle school or high school right now, maybe on the younger side and getting ready to take on the world of adulthood and find your career and find your pathway, find where you want to live, go for it. But if you feel the need to change once or twice or 32 times, as long as you're giving this guy a listen, go for it. You know, I was 24 when I started this whole rejuvenation. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're already in a career searching for a way to really make this happy instead of just this. Maybe you're 34, maybe you're 64. The point is, it's never too late to listen to what's coming from here, because this is your lifeblood. It truly is what keeps you going, and it knows you better than anyone. It's been with you since day one. So stop and give it a listen, and I wish you all the best with the journeys you two can take together, because I've found the joys and the beauties in listening and letting life take me where it can, and I hope you can do the same. Thank you.
This concludes our second session. We'll begin again at 5 o'clock for our last session, Growth, featuring a counseling psychologist, an American Ninja Warrior Junior top competitor, and another student. Amazing speeches about logic, teaching. Please join us in about 20 minutes. Thank you. welcome back. We will now begin our growth session featuring Katherine Noce, Kim Ulrich-Suss, and Kaden Forsha. Why don't they teach logic in these schools? Why should they teach logic in these schools? Please welcome Katherine Noce, a fierce advocate for logic in education, to the stage.
So, I'm no ecologist or biologist by any means, but I think I can safely say that we in America have a problem. It's a parrot problem. See, it's common knowledge that we as humans like to teach parrots to imitate us for our own amusement. I recently saw a video of an African gray parrot reciting a whole bunch of phrases and noises at its owner's cue. And every time it made the right phrase or noise, it got a sunflower seed. If it didn't make the right phrase or noise, the owner would repeat the cue until the parrot got it right. And then it got 2 sunflower seeds, which then got me thinking about, some math or science tests I've taken where, if enough of the class did poorly enough, the teacher would let us correct the test to get some points back. And that's a bit of an eerie comparison to me, because if both an African gray parrot and a student are rewarded for how well they can recite the Pythagorean theorem, what's the difference? Because think about it, we don't see a lot of parrots in college, so there has to be something. René Descartes, a French philosopher from the 1600s, once said, "I think, therefore I am." However, in the 21st century, we tend to imitate or parrot what we've seen, rather than express or apply our original thoughts. While parrot skills are useful in navigating a linear system, human life is significantly more complex. To master life, people need to go beyond mastering simple cues or answering questions. So let me paint you a picture. Imagine that each flow of information you take in a day, from family, from friends, from entertainment, from social media, from school, from work, and so much more, all combines into one river of thought in your mind. Now, take each tiny flow per day and multiply it by weeks and months of commercials, emails, articles, news feeds, videos, movies, posts, memes, hashtags, and so much more. And all of their combined messages start beating at your mind and feelings like waves on a cliff. And then suddenly you're drowning in an ocean of unrelenting, unrelated, overpowering data. How can one postmodern, non-parrot person make sense of any of it? We must think logically. In fact, I believe we should go so far as to bring back the study of traditional logic in our schools. Logic is a filter that helps us learn what is valid and real. We should bring back logic in education because it helps us come alive as humans and helps us navigate the rush of social currents in our individualistic society. Logic is a framework for thinking. Logic is a framework for thinking developed by the ancient Greeks, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, those guys. And they used logic to study math, science, language arts, ethics, just about everything we still study today. And traditional logic was taught alongside these subjects until around the 20th century. Formal logic and informal logic share components and techniques while differing in where and how they are used. Formal logic is more likely to be found in places like courtrooms or debate podiums, where everything is ordered and done with exacting purpose. Informal logic, however, is more often found troubleshooting fallacies with a friend in a coffee shop. No matter its form, logic is a tried and true filter used to separate what is real from what is not. And I think this ancient life hack is about due for a postmodern reboot. So now I bet I've got you wondering, Why does a teenage girl in 2020, who should probably be thinking about college, care so much about such an ancient, out-of-style idea like logic? Well, my whole life I've been a reader. In elementary school, I inhaled novels at alarming speeds. And naturally, this presented me with a lot of ideas. So I grew up with these ideas, marinating in my brain, and by the time I was in middle school, I started to want to talk about them, to really talk about them, but I never knew how. I didn't even really understand what it was that I wanted to talk about so badly. I felt stuck in my own skin. So school went on, and I took geometry. And in geometry, we started talking about using logic to prove geometric theorems. That unit stuck with me. Later on in high school, I still wanted to talk about the ideas from elementary and middle school, but again, trying to figure out how to say the ideas was still like trying to explain color to the blind. I tried to figure it out through my schoolwork, but there was a wall. I tried to, quote, think for myself, but I didn't know how to do that without first parroting someone else's point of view. Then I took a logic class as an elective, and suddenly I could think clearly. I felt free. I was a person again, not a parrot. And you know the feeling where you finally cleaned your room after weeks and months of procrastination, and then all you can think is, wow, I forgot how much floor space I had in here. That's what it felt like in my head once I finally learned logic. Logic gave me the structure I needed to express my own thoughts. Logic gave me a voice to speak up and speak out about the passions I'd carried in my mind my whole life. Learning logic helped me grow as a human and helped me navigate life. I could think for myself, so I could finally be myself. This individualistic, vocal, empowered society that we live in deserves citizens who can navigate their lives with equal strength and independence. Logic is a filter that cleans out popular fallacies and strengthens the individual's mind so they can speak out with truth and with substance and with authority. I learned this through my study of logic, and I think it would benefit us as people who desperately want to be seen as individuals if we brought back the study of traditional logic for everyone. Logic helps us think for ourselves so we can be ourselves. Thank you.
You may be aware of how drugs affect your brain, but did you know that nature can be an even better cure? Our next speaker will share the positive effects on the great outdoors on our psychology. Please welcome Ulrich-Suss to the stage.
I was beside myself with delight as I walked out of my Bronx apartment building, holding my dad's hand. The year was 1963, and I was 5. So although all of the New York City housing projects were surrounded by cement, mine had a little grass area out front. And this morning, I had gotten a whiff of the tantalizing fragrance of freshly cut grass. So I ran towards it as fast as my little legs would take me until I heard my dad's booming voice, "Stop, Kim." I came to a screeching halt. Well, at the time, there was a chain around that grass, and on that chain, there was a sign. Well, I couldn't read yet, so my dad read it to me. "Keep off the grass." "Why?" I squealed. Well, he calmly explained that this was a pretty piece of nature for everybody to look at. But if we all walked on it or ran on it, it would get ruined. I was so confused. I asked myself, why? Why would anybody put grass there and then forbid me from running on it or jumping on it or playing on it? That just seemed cruel. So I squatted right down next to that patch, and I kept my feet dutifully on the cement. But I reached my little hand underneath, and I touched the cool, refreshing blades. And when my dad wasn't looking, I grabbed a handful of it, and I stuck that grass in my jacket pocket, so that all day long on the stinky New York City subway, I could get a whiff whenever I wanted. So began the pull of nature for this little girl. From that moment on, I made it my life's mission to stay on the grass. Today, I'd like to share a little bit about how this city girl reconnected to nature and how studies now validate my internal longing. But most importantly, what that can mean for you. How coming alive in nature can help us to balance out the anxiety and depression that's just become rampant during these uncertain times. My name is Kim Ulrich-Suss. Most people call me Coach. I have a master's in counseling psychology and have spent the last 38 years as a teacher and personal counselor at Deer Valley High School. I've also had the absolute enjoyment and excitement of a successful coaching career, culminating in being inducted in the Arizona State High School Coaches Hall of Fame this April. But as an educator, I also had my summers off. So for my summer job for many, many years, I took teenagers camping on a 6-week traveling camping trip. We started right here in Colorado, horseback riding over 100 miles in the Wimminooch Wilderness. And then we went to Utah, and we kayaked and rafted over 50 miles on the rivers. And finally, we summited the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. Some summers, we made it all the way to Alaska. Currently, I am living my encore career of being a life coach and also leading women's nature retreats. So, although I couldn't be more proud of all of my athletes and our successes, the thing that's been very personally satisfying to me is the moments. The moments like when Nicole saw that little owl pop its head out of the tree. And she got so excited and fascinated by how cute that owl was, I could just see all the stress she brought with her disappear from her face. Or the time that my women's group was helping each other across the ropes course. And when they got done, they strangled me because I made them do it. And then we all got giggling like little girls again. Or the time that Jennifer pulled herself up the last pitch of the mountain and stood on top, exuding a newfound confidence, and stood there saying, if I could do this, I can do anything. These moments where people transform themselves in nature have been priceless to me. The Japanese call it Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. The Korean researchers call it forest medicine. And here in America, we have two new movements in ecopsychiatry and ecopsychology. John Muir once said, "Come into the woods, for here is rest." Now we have some studies to show not only how right he was, but why. So, our brain on nature and a trick. Dr. Strauss of Harvard Medical School explains that an overactive fight or flight response is the cause of many people's anxiety during uncertain times. But the quiet sounds and the calming sounds in nature have been shown to reduce our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and actually allow that fight or flight response to calm down. Secondly, when people are overly stressed or even depressed, their prefrontal cortex tends to malfunction and take them into these negative thoughts, which lead into negative feelings, into the next negative thought, and then I worry about the next negative thought in this continuous loop. But the sights and the sounds and the smells of nature have been shown to be a really good distractor to our prefrontal cortex, hence allowing us to just be a stopgap, have a stopgap to our worry loop. Lastly, there's a trick to the way that we engage in nature that not only calms us down, but can simultaneously make us feel more alive. Researchers have shown that adding the 5 following components can not only decrease our cortisol, but can give us a cocktail of serotonin, which is very similar to what an antidepressant or anxiety drug does. So the first component is mindfulness, being 100% present. The second is fascination. Look at that rock with the leaf growing on it. There's not a lot of soil. How is that possible? Let me look closer. Number 3 is challenge. You know, usually I hike in the woods, but today I'm gonna run. And number 4 is imagination. Look at those beautiful clouds in the sky. I see an animal in them. What do you see? And last but not least, allowing us to feel part of something larger than ourselves. Won Sop-shin is a leading Korean forest medicine researcher, and he led 9-day forest retreats. And at the end of those retreats, the reduction in depression scores was a significant 64%. Well, in context, when the reduction of depression scores is 50% or more, that's the gold standard for drug trials. Just think about that. But the best news yet is that other researchers have shown that just a half day in a city park or a few hours in nature can give very similar positive effects. So, it doesn't matter how old you are, or even if you have limited time, get outside and reap some of these positive rewards. Lastly, I want to talk to you about the power of Green X. What is Green X? It's simple. It's exercising or playing sports or just playing outside. and it's the ultimate mood enhancer. Green X has been shown to quickly stifle our cortisol, and the combination of sunlight and physical exercise just gives us a rush of our happy chemicals. So I challenge you to go snowshoeing in the woods after a newly fallen snow blankets the ground and not feel that rush. Within 5 minutes of green activity, data shows that our moods can really increase. So, go out and do yoga in a beautiful place, or kayak or canoe on a mountain lake, or hike the trails, or even train for a triathlon. Whatever works for you. But do it outside and in a beautiful setting as much as you can. And remember, active play counts. So find a green, grassy hill that doesn't have a sign, and grab your daughter's hand and roll down it together and let yourself be a kid again.
You ready? You can start.
In that moment, I have never felt more alive. So, whether it's staying on the grass or here in Colorado in the snow, let nature be the only drug you ever need. Thank you.
Our last speaker has an impressive resume for a 6th grader. American Ninja Warrior Junior top competitor, ADHD and dyslexia advocate, also known as the Chatterbox Ninja. Please welcome Kaden Forsha to the stage to speak on how he uses his obstacles to grow.
Hello. I know what you're thinking. Who let this young little squirt on stage? The TED team did. Allow me to introduce myself. Hi, my name's Kaden Forsha. I'm 11 years old and I'm in 6th grade. You might recognize me as the Chatterbox Ninja from the hit TV show American Ninja Warrior Junior. And I'm here to talk to you about how I found my passion and how I've used it to embrace all the obstacles in my life. This has helped me a lot because life is long with lots of obstacles. And if I didn't choose to embrace these obstacles in my life, I would have a long, boring, hard life. My 2 biggest obstacles are dyslexia and ADHD. But I've used my passion, American Ninja Warrior, to embrace these obstacles. And as it turns out, embracing my dyslexia and ADHD have actually made me a better ninja. So American Ninja Warrior is all about obstacle course racing. Isn't that interesting? Imagine getting excited for an obstacle instead of dreading it. Let me tell you a story about when I first learned to embrace my dyslexia. In 2nd grade, me and my friend were allowed to pick out a book. My friend goes straight to the chapter books. And I'm like, yo, really, bro? You're going to the chapter books? Meet me by the kindergarten books when you're done. The kindergarten books were the only books I was able to read. In that moment, I felt sad, and like I wasn't as good as everybody else. And that was my experience with having dyslexia. So now's the time that I have to make a choice. I could choose to be upset and discouraged that my friend was already reading chapter books, and I couldn't even read a picture book. But no way! It's an obstacle! I'm making the choice to embrace it and have fun with it. I see it as a gift because it helps me see the world in a different way. Between dyslexia, ninja, and working hard, I've gone from the 3rd percentile in reading up to the 55th percentile in reading. I also have ADHD. Speaking of ADHD, you might notice that I'm going to keep pacing back and forth throughout this whole speech. Pacing helps me focus, and it also gets all my extra ADHD energy out in a positive way. Now, I could choose to be embarrassed and try to hide my ADHD. But no way! I'm making the choice to embrace it and have fun with it. I see it as a strength because it makes me a better ninja. In my 11 trips around the sun, I've learned that every obstacle presents an opportunity to embrace that obstacle. That's how I found my passion. Ninja! Finding my passion has also helped me turn my dyslexia and ADHD into a gift because they help me see the world in a different way. They've taught me to love to work hard in cycles, and they made me the Chatterbox Ninja. First, let me explain how I found my passion with a story. When I was very young, I didn't play with toys. I was interested in doing anything active, running around the house, crawling around the house, jumping off the stairs, climbing the walls, anything active. My mom would buy the coolest toys and try to get me to play with them. I wouldn't. Then she'd build the coolest Lego structures and encourage me to add on. Forget about it. I just knock them down and run through and crawl through them as fast as I could. And I thought that that was the funniest thing in the world. But Mom did not. She was worried. We finally got me diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. And my mom realized, hey, maybe he didn't have the fine motor skills or the attention span to play with toys. We also realized that I was a lot happier when we burned my extra ADHD energy in a positive way. We made the choice to embrace my ADHD instead of trying to suppress it. Then when I saw the TV show, American Ninja Warrior, I was hooked. I started pretending that my house was the American Ninja Warrior obstacle course. My parents wanted to embrace my movement, so they decided to bring a few obstacles into the house. I was using the obstacles all the time, and because I was burning all my extra ADHD energy in a positive way, I could focus better in school. That was enough to convince my parents to move the furniture out and the obstacles in. Now we have obstacles in our living room, dining room, hallway, basement, and backyard. And we have a blast doing ninja as a family. I found my passion, which has helped me make the choice to turn my ADHD into a gift. But It's also helped me turn my dyslexia into a gift. Let me tell you a story about that. So, both seasons of American Ninja Warrior Jr. The ninja community loves to help each other out, so we were all backstage creating the best plan on how to get through the course. Most ninjas think of the course as something they need to beat, but I think of the course as it's working with me. Because without the course, you just fall in the water, because there's water below each obstacle. The obstacles are the only reason why you don't fall in the water. So, all my ideas were different than everybody else's, because my dyslexic mind thinks differently. I choose to love and embrace my dyslexic mind for coming up with different solutions, even if it isn't always the best solution. I finished in the top 8 of both seasons on American Ninja Warrior Jr. because I embrace my dyslexic mind. So, finding my passion has also helped me develop a growth mindset, which has taught me that hard work and setting goals can help me embrace all the obstacles in my life. A growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset means that I had to believe that with hard work, I could achieve my goals. Now, I've always been a hard worker, but my experience as a dyslexic kid has been kind of tough. I have to work so much harder than my friends do. Did you know that the University of Washington study found that dyslexic kids use 5 times the brain area when performing a simple language task than non-dyslexic kids do? No wonder I was so tired after study sessions. I watched my friends go home and get to play after school. I was doing tutoring 3 to 5 times per week, going to dyslexia camp in the summer, and spending a lot of extra time on my schoolwork. And my brain was working 5 times harder than my peers. I felt different from my friends, and sometimes I just wanted to play instead of work so hard. It was time for me to make a choice. I could choose to dread tutoring and only do the bare minimum. Or I could choose to do all my tutoring, extra schoolwork, and try to like it. It was Ninja that really made that choice for me. I started setting goals in Ninja and achieving them, and that felt great. So I decided, well, I want to keep achieving goals. So then I started setting goals in school and achieving them, and that felt great too. That's what really taught me to learn to like to work hard. It took 2.5 years of hard work, but I finally went from the 3rd percentile in reading up to the 55th percentile in reading. And I still plan to work hard every day. Embracing one obstacle empowers me to embrace the next obstacle. That's how I became the Chatterbox Ninja. My parents used to think that my constant talking was an obstacle. But look at me now. I just chatterboxed my way onto the stage of a TED Talk. I've also been to lots of different places to do speeches for dyslexic kids and their parents. I've even gotten to speak at the Colorado State Capitol 3 times in favor of a dyslexic bill. This has helped me understand that there are lots of other struggling readers out there that struggled like I did. It makes me feel good to know that I have the power to help other kids with dyslexia and ADHD. Dyslexia and ADHD are spectrums, so some cases are very mild, while other cases are very severe. Did you know that the National Center for Learning Disabilities found that 5 to 17% of people are dyslexic? And 5 to 11% of people have ADHD. A study of the Texas prison found that 80% of those prisoners were illiterate. When I got the right kind of multisensory phonics learning, backed up by the science of reading, when I got the right kind of multisensory phonics instruction, backed up by the science of reading, it actually changed the way my brain worked. And I was able to learn to read. We need to get struggling readers the help they need as early as possible so we can give them better lives. I'm going to keep advocating for kids the best way I know how, with my chatterbox skills. I want to sum things up with a few questions for you. What's your biggest obstacle in life? How do you choose to see that obstacle? Do you dread it? Does it embarrass you, or are you excited about it? Now, how can you make a more positive choice in embracing your obstacle and finding the opportunities hiding in it? Okay, now, what's your passion? Now, how can you use your passion to do a better job in embracing your obstacle? Remember, it is a choice. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience.
Thank you all for joining us for this live-streamed TEDx event. Tonight, you have heard stories of journey, rebirth, and growth. You have learned how you can reshape your own narrative, heard the many reasons why agriculture is so vital in education, and learned from a young advocate how you can turn your obstacles into opportunities. In 2020, nothing is more important than impacting the world by fully engaging ourselves and the world around us. So I would like to leave you with this. What makes you come alive? Thank you, and good night.